You're scrolling through a dating app at midnight, and you notice something disturbing. Every profile looks like a personal branding campaign. Perfect photos with perfect lighting. Bios that read like resumes, highlighting accomplishments and listing requirements for potential partners. Everyone's selling themselves like products while simultaneously treating other people as disposable commodities. You match with someone, have a great conversation, and then they ghost you without explanation because someone slightly more attractive just matched with them. Welcome to modern dating culture, where narcissistic traits aren't just common, they're practically required to compete. But here's what nobody's talking about. This isn't just about individual bad behavior. We've created a system that actively rewards narcissism and punishes genuine vulnerability. Today, we're delving into the underlying psychology behind why dating feels so toxic right now and what it's doing to our ability to form genuine human connections. Let's start by understanding what narcissism actually is, because the term gets thrown around loosely. Clinical narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, is a serious mental health condition characterized by grandiosity, lack of empathy, need for admiration, and fragile self-esteem hidden beneath arrogance. But when we talk about narcissism in dating culture, we're usually talking about narcissistic traits, which exist on a spectrum. Everyone has some narcissistic traits. Healthy narcissism includes self-confidence, self-care, and appropriate self-interest. But when these traits become excessive, when self-focus overrides consideration for others, when people can only see others as tools for their own gratification, that's when it becomes problematic. Modern dating apps are perfectly designed to amplify narcissistic traits. Think about the mechanics. You create a profile that's essentially a highlight reel of your life. You choose your most flattering photos. You craft a bio that makes you sound interesting, successful, and desirable. You're literally creating a personal brand. Then you swipe through potential partners like you're shopping online, making split-second judgments based almost entirely on appearance. This process trains you to commodify yourself and objectify others simultaneously. It's narcissism training disguised as dating. The validation mechanics are even worse. Every match gives you a little dopamine hit. Every like tells you you're desirable. Every message confirms your attractiveness. This creates an addiction to external validation that's fundamentally narcissistic. You start measuring your worth by how many matches you get, how quickly people respond, and how much attention you receive. Your self-esteem becomes dependent on metrics that have nothing to do with your actual value as a human being. And when your self-worth is tied to external validation, you develop narcissistic traits as a defense mechanism. You become more focused on image management than authentic connection. Here's where it gets psychologically interesting. Dating apps create what psychologists refer to as a paradox of choice. When you have unlimited options, every person becomes less valuable because they're easily replaceable. You match with someone great, but you keep swiping because what if there's someone even better? This mentality is fundamentally narcissistic because it treats people as interchangeable products rather than unique individuals. You're not looking for a person to connect with. You're looking for the best possible option, as if humans can be ranked and optimized like you would a phone. This creates a culture of disposability. Someone's not perfect? Ghost them and move on. Conversation feels like work? Stop responding. They're going through something difficult? Too much drama. Next. The ease of moving on to the next option eliminates any incentive to work through minor incompatibilities or show basic human empathy. And this disposability goes both ways. You're treating others as disposable while knowing they're treating you the same way. This creates a defensive narcissism where everyone is protecting themselves from being discarded by becoming more focused on their own needs and less invested in others. The visual focus of dating apps also feeds narcissism in damaging ways. When attraction is primarily visual and judgments are made in a matter of seconds, appearance becomes disproportionately important. This creates pressure to appear perfect, to present an idealized version of yourself, to compete on superficial metrics. People develop narcissistic traits around their appearance because that's what gets rewarded. They spend hours taking selfies, editing photos, and crafting the perfect visual brand. The actual person becomes secondary to the image they project. And when you meet someone in person after matching online, there's this weird disconnect because you've both been interacting with carefully curated images rather than real people. Social media integration exacerbates the issue. Your dating profile links to your Instagram, which is another carefully curated highlight reel. Now, potential partners can scroll through your entire personal brand before deciding if you're worth talking to. This creates pressure to maintain a consistently impressive image across platforms. Your life has to look aspirational. Your experiences have to seem exciting. Your friend group has to appear cool. Everything becomes performance. Everything becomes content. Nothing is just lived anymore. It's all material for your personal brand. That's exhausting, and it's fundamentally narcissistic. Let's talk about the empathy deficit this creates. Empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, requires seeing others as fully human with their own complex inner lives. However, when you're swiping through hundreds of profiles, juggling multiple conversations simultaneously, and constantly evaluating and comparing options, empathy becomes difficult. People become profiles. Profiles become metrics. Metrics become a game you're trying to win. The psychological distance created by screens makes it even easier to dehumanize others. You'd never treat someone face-to-face the way you might treat them through an app because screens create emotional distance that allows narcissistic behavior. The ghosting phenomenon is a perfect example. Ghosting, just disappearing without explanation when you're no longer interested, would be unthinkably rude in face-to-face interactions. But in dating apps, it's normalized. Why? Because the other person doesn't feel fully real to you. They're a profile you are messaging, not a human being whose feelings matter. The lack of empathy required to ghost someone reveals how narcissistic dating culture has become. You prioritize your own convenience and comfort over another person's dignity and emotional well-being without even thinking about it. That's narcissism. The constant comparison that dating apps enable is toxic for everyone involved. You're comparing yourself to others, wondering if you're attractive enough, interesting enough, successful enough. This breeds insecurity masked as narcissism. You compensate for feeling inadequate by becoming more focused on self-promotion and image management. Simultaneously, you're comparing potential partners to impossible standards, creating a mindset where no one is ever quite good enough. This comparison trap makes genuine connection nearly impossible because you and everyone you're interacting with are too busy performing and evaluating to actually be present with each other. Gender dynamics in modern dating culture have their own narcissistic patterns. Men often develop what psychologists call vulnerable narcissism, where deep insecurity is masked by aggressive self-promotion and objectification of women. The manosphere and pickup artist culture feed this, teaching men to view dating as a game they need to win through manipulation and dominance. Women, meanwhile, face pressure to be simultaneously desirable and unattainable, creating a performance of feminine narcissism focused on being the most attractive option while maintaining control. These gendered narcissistic patterns feed off each other, creating a dating culture where everyone's playing games and no one's being real. The hookup culture that dominates many dating apps has its own narcissistic psychology. Casual sex isn't inherently narcissistic if both people are honest about their intentions and treat each other with respect. But hookup culture often involves using people for physical gratification while being emotionally unavailable and dishonest about intentions. That's narcissistic. The ability to have sex with someone while feeling nothing for them, while seeing them purely as a means to your own pleasure, requires a significant empathy deficit. And when this becomes the norm, when emotional unavailability is valorized and vulnerability is seen as weakness, we've created a culture that rewards narcissistic traits. Here's what makes this particularly damaging. Young people are learning relationship skills in this environment. They're developing their understanding of intimacy, connection, and partnership in a culture that treats people as disposable products and rewards narcissistic behavior. This doesn't just affect dating. It affects their entire capacity for human connection. If you learn that vulnerability gets punished, that empathy is weakness, that image matters more than substance, how do you ever develop the skills for genuine intimacy? How do you build the kind of deep relationships that humans need to thrive? The anxiety and depression rates among young people, particularly around dating and relationships, are skyrocketing. This isn't a coincidence. When your self-worth depends on external validation metrics, when you're constantly comparing yourself to curated images, when you're treated as disposable and treat others the same way, it destroys your mental health. The narcissistic defense mechanisms people develop to survive in this culture actually make them more fragile, not less. The grandiosity and confidence are masks for deep insecurity and fear of rejection. And underneath all the performance, people are lonely, desperately lonely. They have hundreds of matches, but no real connection. They're drowning in potential options, but starving for genuine intimacy. So what do we do about this? First, recognize that individual solutions to systemic problems are limited. You can try to date differently, to be more authentic, to resist narcissistic patterns. And you should. But as long as the system rewards narcissism, most people will continue engaging in narcissistic behavior because it seems like the only way to compete. We need broader cultural shifts in how we approach dating and relationships. We need to value depth over breadth, substance over image, vulnerability over performance. We need to create spaces for authentic connection that don't turn human relationships into a game. On an individual level, the most important thing is developing self-awareness. Notice when you're engaging in narcissistic patterns. Are you treating people as disposable? Are you fixated on your image while overlooking your character? Are you measuring your worth by validation metrics? Are you objectifying others to gain their approval? Awareness is the first step. You can't change patterns you don't recognize. The second step is practicing empathy intentionally. Remember that every profile represents a real person with their own hopes, fears, dreams, and wounds. Treat people online the way you treat them in person. This shouldn't be radical, but in current dating culture, it is. Third, get comfortable with vulnerability. The narcissistic defense mechanisms we develop protect us from rejection, but they also prevent genuine connection. If you want real intimacy, you have to risk being seen fully, flaws and all. This is terrifying in a culture that punishes vulnerability, but it's the only path to authentic relationships. Fourth, examine your relationship with external validation. Matches, likes, or attention don't determine your worth. Those metrics measure nothing real about you. Learning to source your self-esteem internally rather than externally is essential for breaking narcissistic patterns. So here's my question for you. Have you noticed narcissistic patterns in your own dating behavior? And if so, what specific patterns do you recognize? Please drop a comment and let's have an honest conversation about this. No judgment. We're all navigating the same toxic system and trying to figure it out. The narcissism epidemic in modern dating culture isn't really about individual bad people. It's about a system that incentivizes narcissistic behavior and punishes authenticity. Dating apps are designed to maximize engagement and profit, rather than facilitating genuine human connection. That fundamental misalignment between the business model and human needs has created a toxic culture that hurts everyone involved. The good news is we're not helpless. We can choose to engage differently. We can build our relationships outside these systems. We can demand better from the platforms we use. We can create subcultures that value authenticity over performance. But most importantly, we can start by being honest with ourselves about how this culture has affected us, about the narcissistic traits we've developed, not because we're bad people, but because the system rewards them. Acknowledging the problem is the first step toward changing it. And change is possible. It starts with each of us choosing vulnerability over performance, empathy over narcissism, and genuine connection over curated image. That's how we build the kind of relationships that actually nourish us rather than destroying us. If this exploration of dating culture's dark psychology resonated with you, if it named patterns you've experienced but couldn't articulate, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We're diving deep into the uncomfortable truths about modern life, the psychological realities nobody wants to talk about, the cultural patterns that shape us without our awareness. Thank you for engaging with difficult ideas. Remember, breaking toxic patterns starts with seeing them clearly.